Atop a cliff under the full moon, a man praises Jin, So-won's impressive memory. Jin So-won is badly wounded and says that everything happened thanks to the other man. The mysterious man reveals that all the records of the Myram Alliance have finally been restored. This man is Young Soa, the leader of the Myram Alliance, who coldly thanks him for his services. Kneeling and bleeding, Jin So-won laments that he did it all just by following his orders. He asks furiously if the reward for all his dedication will be just a humiliating end. Young Soa draws his sword, saying that a brilliant mind would be dangerous if it sided with the demonic cult. He points the blade and states that for the justice and safety of the alliance, Jin So-won and his memories must disappear, faced with the threat of his demise. Jin So-won just lets out a sarcastic laugh upon hearing about that cause. The captain laughs loudly and questions what danger the decaying Myram Alliance would be in if he remained alive. He scoffs, saying the alliance has already lost to the cult and can barely survive. So talking about danger is a joke. Young Soa retorts with extreme seriousness, stating that they will still defeat the enemy and rise again. Jin So-won scoffs, recalling that the leaders fled north, sacrificing countless innocent people as shields. He admits that, seeing the rush to eliminate people for a cause, it's hard to tell the alliance apart from the cult itself. The alliance leader is deeply shaken. Upon hearing those words about the Tail sect, Jin So-won approaches the edge of the cliff and bitterly regrets entrusting his life to such filthy hands. He raises his blood-stained hand, and decides to make one last decision on his own. With a smile on his face, he throws himself into the abyss, determined to be the one responsible for his own end. As he falls into the darkness, he reflects that having a perfect memory turned his life into a living hell. He recalls when the Great War began, and he was recruited along with his companions from his small sect. Faced with the enemy's strength, the leaders fled and used the weaker warriors as disposable shields. To save his disciples, he accepted the desperate offer to memorize all the Alliance's records. Lying on the ground, he thinks he should have focused on training his martial arts instead of just reading books. He curses the heavens for giving him the gift of a perfect memory instead of power or internal energy. As his end nears, a bracelet on his bloodied wrist begins to glow intensely. In his last breaths, he deeply wishes he had the strength to protect all of his people. Suddenly, angry voices emerge, asking if Jin So-won really passed out and if that was all he had. Someone pokes his head with a wooden sword and mocks him, saying that his own disciples could take more. Feeling the pain, the young man grips the handle of his weapon, cursing his memory that insists on recording everything. He tries to get up as the physical agony begins to overwhelmingly take over his mind. Jin So-won lets out a desperate scream upon realizing his incredible memory now makes him recall even physical pain. Upon opening his eyes, he is completely confused to see several youths in uniform gathered around him. Looking around in disbelief, he notices something extremely familiar about the place where he's lying. The young man realizes he is in the training yard of the Tail sect exactly as it was in the past. Two disciples watch his reaction with expressions full of surprise and concern. Jin So-won's heart races and he blushes as he finally understands what is happening. Without wasting any time, the young man starts running towards the companions. He thought he had lost forever, overcome with emotion. He throws himself into the arms of the two disciples and hugs them. With all his might, he calls out to Hong, who gets extremely embarrassed and asks what on earth her senior is doing. He also hugs Junpyo, who is confused by the sudden gesture and asks if something is wrong. The other disciples start whispering among themselves, thinking their senior ate something bad or went crazy. Jin So-won begins to cry with relief at seeing everyone alive, thinking it's just an illusion before his passing. He cracks a warm smile and thanks his memory for at least letting him see those faces one last time. The two youths still don't understand any of his dramatic and affectionate reaction. He pinches Hong's cheeks, saying she was cute as a child and that he even misses her lectures. Then he squeezes Junpyo and jokes about the time the boy used to wet the bed, leaving him embarrassed. A harsh voice interrupts the moment, asking if Jin So-won is faking madness out of fear of their duel. The guy demands he grab his sword, threatening to go after the disciples if he refuses the fight. Seeing his rival, the young man mentally complains that his final illusion could have spared him this guy's presence. That was Jia Kil, Young, a rich kid who used duels as an excuse to beat up the sect's disciples. Decides to accept the duel once and for all, remembering how they suffered in silence, afraid of losing their sponsorship. He strikes a confident pose and decides to use this supposed final illusion to get revenge on his old rival. The opponent becomes visibly furious at the smile and mocking tone the young man shows him. Completely enraged, the rich kid charges forward at high speed with his wooden sword ready to strike. Jinso just watches him approach with impressive serenity and very attentive eyes. He moves calmly as he recalls the movements of the sword technique that used to defeat him in the past. It was a wild art taught in secret by a famous wandering swordsman hired by the rival's family. He remembers that his rival always aimed for the eyes, and though he knew the moves, he previously lacked the strength to react. However, compared to the terrifying warriors of the demonic cult he faced, his rival's attacks seemed far too slow. The adversary's eyes widen as he realizes his fastest strike was dodged with extreme ease. All of this is nothing compared to the thousands of deadly techniques he was forced to memorize at the risk of his life. Suddenly, Jinso decides to attack using a legendary sword technique he had memorized in the future. As his opponent desperately charges, the perfect movements of the sword technique form clearly in the protagonist's mind. His eyes shine brightly as he executes the technique with surgical and lethal precision. With a single, graceful move, he unleashes a devastating blow that cuts through the air toward his opponent. The rival is struck square in the head and spits blood, in disbelief at seeing that legendary combat technique being used. The adversary falls in total agony and astonishment, while Jinso laughs softly, feeling enormous satisfaction. He feels reinvigorated for finally managing to defeat that bully using his own sex technique. The final impact knocks the insolent young man down for good, providing an unbelievable sense of relief and triumph. Everyone around watches the scene in complete silence, unable to believe the speed of that counterattack. The defeated young man stumbles and leans on his own sword, letting out groans of pain as the dust begins to settle. His sect mates are dumbfounded to see that he actually cracked the head of the powerful Merchant Association's son. Bloodied and humiliated, the rich kid shouts with all his might that this isn't over. He tries to get up, consumed by irrational hatred, demanding that the protagonist pay dearly for what he just did. However, before he can do anything, the bully collapses unconscious in front of a confused Jinsoan. One of the young female disciples watches the aggressor fall with wide eyes, almost unable to speak. The little ones begin to celebrate cheerfully, confessing that they used to think their senior was a bit pathetic and cowardly. The protagonist feels great satisfaction, seeing the smiles on the faces of all the kids from his beloved sect. He thanks the heavens for this illusion, happy to be able to thrash his rival before finally passing on in peace. Just as he starts to relax, a powerful punch lands square on his face, shattering the peaceful moment. It's the young Hong who yells furiously, asking if he has truly gone mad to do something so crazy. She desperately questions what they will do if the influential Merchant Association cuts off their vital sponsorship. Jinso feels his cheek sting from the blow and realizes things are too real to be a simple illusion. He lets out a cry of shock as he finally deduces that this situation is not a mere memory before his passing. Faced with his desperation, Hong just gives a slightly sarcastic smile as she plans her next move. She lands another heavy blow on him, telling him to stop talking nonsense and take responsibility for what he did. The young man falls on his back, completely dazed by the consecutive physical attacks he just suffered. While the others try to revive him, the young man finally accepts the absurd reality that he has truly returned to the past. In a quiet room, several wooden drawers of a medicine cabinet suggest he was taken to the infirmary. Lying in a relaxed manner, he rests with bandages on his face to treat the injuries from Hong's punches. He takes advantage of the quiet place to organize his thoughts and try to figure out how this time travel happened. He recalls that in his original timeline, the whole tragedy began with the resurgence of the demonic cult. The defeat in the subsequent war destroyed the alliance and brought his own sect to the brink of complete ruin. In those dark times, his incredible ability to memorize ended up becoming the group's only hope. He was given the exhausting mission of committing to memory and restoring every one of the Miram Alliance's ancient sacred books. He pushed himself to the limit, promising to record every detail and character of those documents without making a single mistake. His only request in exchange for that colossal effort was that they spare the young disciples from going to the battlefield. In the end, the Alliance itself decided his memories were too dangerous and cowardly tried to eliminate him. He was sure he would perish in the fall, but somehow he mysteriously woke up years in the past. Furthermore, he realized that all the legendary techniques he memorized are still perfectly stored in his mind. Thanks to the martial arts manuals still left in his mind, he was able to change his destiny. He reflects that he easily defeated an opponent who, in his past life, he could have never beaten alone. Looking at his wrist, he notices that only the Jade Dragon bracelet came back with him to this era. This bracelet was a trophy from one of his rare victories against the dangerous demonic cult in the future. As he thinks about the mysterious bracelet, he hears shouts from outside demanding that he be handed over immediately. The young man quickly gets out of bed, intrigued by the hostile shouting coming from the sect's outer courtyard. A fat, very rich man bellows furiously, demanding to see who was responsible for injuring his son's head. The visitor threatens to cut off all financial sponsorship for the sect. Starting this very month, if they do nothing, on the other side of the door, the sect leader tries to calm the sponsor down, humbly apologizing. That loudmouth man is Giant Seek, the bully's father, who continues to humiliate the leader, calling the young man a country bumpkin. He hears the leader begging for forgiveness, while the rich man blames him for not educating his disciples properly. Jin So-on remembers how, in the future, all his companions met a tragic end in the war. The suffering and unjust ends of those he loved are still deeply etched in his memories. Now that he has been given a second chance at life, he is fully determined not to let this tragedy happen again. He recalls his own tragic passing in the past and swears that this time, things will be completely different. With fury in his eyes, the young man bites and breaks the piece of wood he had in his mouth to ease the pain. He stretches and begins to prepare to go and settle things personally with the arrogant sponsor. With a mysterious object in hand, he knows exactly which card to play to turn the tables in his favor, with a sharp and calculating gaze. He decides that the perfect moment to cause a big commotion has arrived. In the courtyard, the young woman thanks him for his supposed generosity as the rich man walks away, huffing with arrogance. Ji-yeon Sik grumbles irritably, saying he'll only let it slide this time out of pure condescension. Suddenly, a calm voice from the rooftop announces that he heard the man was looking for him. He ironically introduces himself as the insignificant country bumpkin and smiles mockingly at the rich merchant. The merchant and his guard are completely stunned to see the young man standing on the roof with such audacity. Jin So-on leaps from the roof, landing nimbly right in front of the man, who quickly recognizes him and becomes enraged. The young man sighs with disdain and questions why he's being insulted by someone who isn't even that much older. The rich merchant is utterly confused by the lack of respect and audacity of this young disciple. He ironically says it's ridiculous to make a scene over a mere blow to the head during a formal duel. The man shouts that his son was the victim of a cowardly trick and that the entire sect should just serve the boy, bored. Jin So-on retorts, reminding him that several other boys were bedridden for days after being beaten by his son. He adopts a dark tone and says the merchant is the one daydreaming. If he thinks his incompetent son will get into the academy, the rich merchant begins to tremble with rage and screams in indignation, while his subordinate hastily tries to calm him down. He points his finger furiously, asking if the boy thinks he can handle the consequences. If the sponsorship is cut, faced with all that fury and financial threat, the young man just offers a small, mysterious smile. The man guffaws, saying their sect is broke and that without his help, they'll all be starving by tomorrow. That sect was once great, but it lost all its glory and today only holds onto the prestige of its old name. However, as an official member, the sect still holds the exclusive right to recommend a disciple without needing an exam. That's why the merchant's son joined them, paying a fortune, just to get that special spot at the academy. Jin So unchallengingly approaches the merchant and calmly tells him to go ahead and cut the sponsorship. He guarantees he'll take full responsibility, but says he's extremely curious about one specific detail. Grabbing the man's arm tightly, he reminds him that the academy's special selection is less than a year away. The young man laughs, asking if his son was rejected by all the other major sects for being incompetent. The merchant breaks out in a cold, angry sweat at the accurate taunt, unable to deny that his son indeed had no talent. With hands trembling in indignation, the man stammers, asking if the insolent boy knows who he's talking to. Out of his mind, he bellows that the Alliance doesn't even care about their failed sect anymore, and that he is their only salvation. Jin So-on just stares at him with disdain, knowing all too well the schemes the merchant used in the past. He gets closer and whispers in his ear that it's actually the sect that's saving his family's reputation. The man's eyes widen in shock as he realizes the young man knows exactly what his biggest weakness is without giving him time to respond. The protagonist simply turns his back and begins to walk calmly away. The merchant stands there, trembling and speechless, finally understanding that he no longer has control of the situation. The merchant bellows, calling the boy insolent, but is interrupted by his own guard who tries to hold him back. With a relentless look, he reveals to himself that this cold determination was what he learned upon his demise. Shortly after, he comically realizes he acted on impulse and hasn't planned out his next steps in detail yet. The sun begins to set over the mountains, bringing a new night and more time for him to plan his future. In front of a mysterious cave hidden among the rocks, glowing roots indicate the presence of something special inside. He enters the dark cave focused on his one and only main goal right now, which is to become infinitely stronger. The young man knows that his current sect's basic techniques won't be enough, leaving only one path forward. He needs to find the legendary 10,000-year-old fire herb to obtain a colossal amount of pure internal energy. The detailed location of all the herbs from the Alliance's secret book is perfectly etched in his brilliant mind. However, he finds a monstrous creature guarding the place, much worse than the descriptions in the old books. Knowing the risks, he prepares with determination as obtaining that sacred herb is the first step of his journey. He advances swiftly, delivering a strike with his wooden sword to try and immobilize the monster in a single blow. But he quickly gives up on the idea, remembering that his current strength is too weak to waste energy in direct combat. Instead of using brute force, the young man decides to light a makeshift torch to use against the terrible creature. He smiles mischievously, realizing that intelligence can be a much more lethal weapon than any fine sword. The young man learned from books that a good warrior doesn't need sharp swords if he can use the environment to his advantage. The multi-eyed monster panics when it sees the fire spreading rapidly, surrounding it with no chance of escape. He watches the creature get consumed by the flames, convinced that winning by any means necessary is what truly matters. After the victorious battle, he clenches his fist and silently gives thanks for completing that difficult stage. He celebrates enthusiastically, knowing this is the first step to surpassing all the corrupt leaders of the Alliance. The terrible beast finally lies defeated on the cave floor, with a stake driven directly into its monstrous head. In the center of the lair, a natural stone pedestal holds the rare and valuable reward he was so desperately seeking. The young man approaches the altar, lit by a sliver of natural light, contemplating the prize that will change his life for good. He looks at his own hands after consuming the mystical herb, expecting to feel the immediate flow of legendary internal energy. Suddenly, he screams in despair upon realizing the result wasn't what he expected, and that this is still not enough. He laments that even after devouring the entire plant, root and all, his body couldn't absorb all the divine energy. He comically cries, blaming his sect's outdated techniques and wondering if he's the real useless one here. He slams his hand on the stone floor in frustration, unable to hide his deep disappointment with the result. He knows that if he continues at this slow pace, he will never be able to prevent the great tragedies to come. Alone in the darkness of the cave, he realizes with anguish that he won't be able to protect the dear people of his sect. His memories once again focus on the beginning of the terrible and bloody war that wiped out all his friends in the future. He swears to himself that this time, he will prevent the younger warriors from being used as mere cannon fodder. To save them, the only alternative is to climb the ranks of the Myram Alliance and gain influence before the conflict begins. He clenches his fists against the stone, aware that he needs to pass the prestigious Academy's admission test. In 1 year, the young man looks up with a fierce expression, knowing he absolutely cannot fail in his rescue mission. He tries to calm himself while listening to the dripping in the cave, forcing his mind to find a quick solution to evolve. Looking at his reflection in the water, a brilliant idea strikes him as he remembers the existence of spiritual pills. He recalls that his rival possessed a valuable spiritual pill that had been purchased right around this time. The rival's father spent an immense fortune to obtain the rare and powerful Silma pill directly from MANHUA. However, one day before the boy could consume it, the precious artifact mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Since the thief's identity was never discovered and the theft hasn't happened yet, he realizes he has a unique chance. Confident in his deductive skills, he knows that any intruder would make small mistakes and leave clues behind. The young man dives deep into his vast mental library filled with files and reports to trace the criminal's steps. He begins to analyze in detail the Myram Alliance's monthly report that recorded movements in the region. His memories quickly organize into red lines crossing virtual shelves in search of logical connections. He speeds up the mental search, connecting mission reports and suspicious entry and exit logs from that same period. Patiently, the young man analyzes each stored document. Knowing the ideal answer is hidden in his mind, he cross-references patrol data and local incidents that occurred near the Merchant Association during that period. The information begins to make sense as a red line perfectly connects the names of the suspects. He finally puts all the pieces of the mental puzzle together and pinpoints exactly where the pill will be kept. 3 names of legendary warriors emerge in his mind as the main suspects for the theft that occurred in the past. He clasps his hands, thankful for the luck of having all this strategic knowledge stored in his brain. The young man feels greatly relieved to realize that being a living library is finally bringing great advantages. He decides he will steal the Silma pill before the Real thief does, to use it for his own spiritual benefit. Suddenly, the mystical bracelet on his wrist begins to glow intensely and emit waves of mysterious power. The young man looks startled at the body of the defeated spider, noticing that something very strange is happening. He notices with intrigue that the Jade Dragon bracelet is glowing non-stop in a way he had never seen before. A thick black smoke begins to emerge from the bracelet, startling the young man with its unknown energy. Claws of mystical energy advance on the dead monster, tearing the spiritual essence directly from its chest. The hidden forces envelop the creature's glowing red core, sucking all its power relentlessly. The monster's life energy is completely drained and directed at high speed toward the artifact on his wrist. He shouts in shock as he realizes the bracelet is absorbing and purifying the energy from the monstrous spider's core. Outside the cave, the morning calm continues as small birds fly freely across the sky under the sunlight. Sitting on the dark floor, the young man meditates as the purified red energy begins to merge with his body. He feels the immense spiritual force being absorbed and circulating calmly through all his internal energy channels. His eyes open, shining with an intense blue light, indicating that the fusion process was a complete success. He lets out a hysterical laugh of happiness upon realizing the power in his fists has increased unbelievably. He remembers the bracelet was a magical relic of the blood-sucking demon he had defeated in the future. The young man kept the artifact only as a war memento, not knowing it had the ability to absorb souls. Curious to test his new power, he clenches his fist and throws a quick punch into the air to measure his strength. The punch generates a devastating shockwave that shatters the surrounding rocks and makes the entire cave tremble with the impact. He realizes the monster's purified energy has mixed perfectly with his mental technique. Multiplying his strength with a victorious smile, he thanks the heavens, realizing he now has the power needed to start fighting back. Meanwhile, a grand party with red lanterns celebrates the very expensive pill acquired by the association's leader. The recovered rival proudly displays the mystical pill that promises to boost his internal energy to surreal levels. He continues to boast about the item's rarity, while the young Hong watches him from the courtyard with visible boredom. Hong Saryun rests her chin on her hand thoughtfully, very worried about the sudden disappearance of her dear sect companion. Her eyes reveal a deep melancholy as she recalls a significant moment that happened on this very date. She remembers when her companion took the blame in the past, claiming to be solely responsible for the sect's fate. In that original timeline, Jin Soan ended up being forced to leave the group due to all the pressure from the merchant. The bully continues to laugh loudly and insult Jin Soan, calling him a cowardly fool in front of the entire assembled sect. Suddenly, one of the young disciples runs cheerfully towards her, holding a plate full of tasty food. The little boy offers the roasted meat with a huge smile on his face, completely breaking the melancholic mood. The little ones surround the young woman, showering her with affection, while the rival watches the scene from afar with great hatred and disdain. He walks away, grumbling that he'll teach those meddling brats a harsh lesson as soon as the banquet is over. Hong smiles sweetly at the children and thanks them for their kindness in bringing the meal to the courtyard. One of the girls starts teasing the young woman, asking if she was thinking about her missing senior. Once again, the little ones joke that she always gets quiet when she thinks about him, leaving her completely red with embarrassment. The boys suggest saving some rice cakes and meat for their senior, as they know he hasn't had dinner yet. Seeing the little one's great loyalty and consideration for the young man, she can't help but smile with pride. To hide her emotion, she lets out a giant, loud burp that leaves all the little boys shocked and surprised. She laughs playfully, threatening to eat all their food if they startled by the joke. The boys begin to devour their plates as fast as they can in a very comical scene, as everyone has fun. She wonders to herself what the protagonist is up to so far away. Under the beautiful sunset decorated with glowing lanterns, she mentally calls him an idiot with great affection. Night finally falls on the luxurious mansion of the Merchant Association, illuminated by dozens of festive lanterns. The rival's proud father makes a solemn toast. Before all the guests, celebrating his family's great achievement, Jai Chil, Young drinks cheerfully with his friends, completely intoxicated by the luxury and the false sense of victory. Beautiful dancers perform in the center of the main hall, twirling pink ribbons in an elegant traditional dance. While the party goes on inside, mysterious figures move with extreme agility across the dark roof tiles of the mansion. Suddenly, a masked intruder appears, jumping from the top of the roof in an extremely agile and stealthy manner. He uses his incredible movement skills to glide through the air and quickly escape the guard's sight. The criminal lets out a muffled laugh from behind his mask, very proud of the initial success of his escape plan. This man is Ju Jong Mook, who scoffs at the association's pitiful security while holding the pill from MANHUA. He hastily opens the jewelry box to behold the mystical and mesmerizing glow of the valuable mystical elixir. The soul hunter begins to tremble with pure excitement upon realizing the legendary treasure now belongs to him. As he celebrates and plans to use the mystical power, he doesn't even notice Jin So-on watching him silently from the bushes. But just as he decides to flee, he is surprised by a violent and relentless sword slash. The attack is so lethal that it strikes him down in a single blow, sending his body falling to the forest floor. A cold hand picks up the red case from the ground, offering fake apologies to the freshly fallen man. The new assailant shows a dark look and smiles victoriously while holding the valuable treasure in his dirty hands. Days before the theft, the protagonist carefully planned his trap by visiting a hunting shop. He entered the rustic establishment, focused on getting the necessary equipment for his secret plan. The local merchant looked up and stared at him in surprise, noticing the presence of such an unusual and young customer. Jin So-on explained that he came after hearing rumors that the man sold rare and very dangerous goods. The young man asked directly if he had lethal traps specifically designed to capture people. The hunter found the request quite unusual but smirked, considering the boy a very interesting customer. 2. He guaranteed he had the best equipment in the region, capable of taking down anything from small rabbits to giant bears. Jin So-on placed a heavy bag of coins on the counter and asked for the meanest tiger traps he had. He demanded an extremely sensitive mechanism, strong enough to rip off a bear's leg with ease. The young man smiled devilishly, imagining that his traps could send his target straight to the afterlife. The experienced merchant felt a terrible shiver down his spine and hesitated a bit before closing the deal. Back in the present in the forest, the new assailant admires the mystical case, unaware of the danger lurking in the dark. He scoffs at the soul hunter, saying he expected a much tougher fight against someone so famous in the Jiangyu. The swordsman displays a greedy and wicked smile, having the legendary pill finally secure in his hands. Right behind him, calm footsteps reveal the approach of his sect companions, congratulating him on his success. The two warriors laughed together, boasting about how easy it was to deceive and take out the original thief of the case. They talk coldly about how to hide the body, so the hunter will just be considered missing. But before cleaning up, the accomplice suggests they take a quick look at the legendary mystical pill in the box. Upon opening the red case, a glow of pink energy illuminates the greedy faces of both tricksters. They admire the plant's aroma, not noticing that a masked Jin So-on is standing right behind them, watching everything. They freeze instantly in total shock upon feeling an unknown presence breathing right beside them. The swordsman makes a desperate strike backward, but the intruder dodges with an agile leap and mocks his reflex. Jin So-on displays the red case in his hand, leaving his adversaries perplexed that he stole the box without them noticing. The leader shouts furiously, ordering his companion to capture the insolent intruder immediately and without any mercy. The pursuer charges with blind fury, shouting that the protagonist will pay dearly for coveting their treasure. Running with agility, Jin So-on ironically asks if that shamelessness is what they teach in their sect. The young man runs between the tree trunks, shouting that they were the first to take someone out and steal the case. The pursuer tries to deliver a brutal aerial slash to cut the masked man in half once. And for all, Jin So-on easily dodges by sliding on the grass as the blade only hits the ground, kicking up dust with a malicious smile behind his mask. The young man ironically warns his enemy to watch his step. In the next instant, the pursuer's boot triggers the huge hidden iron trap, which snaps shut with extreme violence. The warrior's face contorts in absolute shock as he feels the metal claws tearing through his flesh and bones. Jin So-on just watches the damage with cold satisfaction, silently celebrating the success of his hunting tactic. The opponent starts to break out in a cold sweat from the agony, trying to hold back desperate screams due to the severity of the wound. An ear-splitting scream of pain echoes throughout the silent forest, completely shattering the tranquility of the night. The leader arrives running desperately as the protagonist pretends to lament that they didn't follow his friendly advice. The remaining swordsman trembles with fury and accuses him of being an insignificant coward for using such low and dirty tricks. The swordsman points his sharp blade, furiously demanding that the intruder remove his mask and reveal his true identity. The protagonist just calmly crouches down and picks up a stone from the ground while responding with pure mockery. He ironically asks if his rival really expects him to formally introduce himself according to the rules of etiquette. The small stone whizzes by and hits the grass, right next to the startled jumping swordsman's feet. The precise impact of the stone triggers another giant iron trap, which snaps shut violently, causing a huge scare. He grits his teeth in terror, seeing he was just one step away from having his lead cruelly crushed. He declares himself the new owner of the mystical elixir and warns that the pair of assailants will be sent straight to prison. He reflects on how he managed to deduce the identity of the real culprits by referencing the Alliance's data and reports. The young man researched historical records of warriors who had mysterious increases in internal energy during the same period. He concluded that the Soul Hunter had been taken out and that 2 members of Jumching had split the pill's effects. The leader shouts in fear, realizing the masked man knows their identities and crimes perfectly. He calmly confirms that he knows very well who the 2 cowards belonging to the famous Jumchang sect are. The man tries to intimidate him, asking if he doesn't fear the terrible revenge of the influential Miram Alliance. The young man scoffs at the threat, saying it's ridiculous for one thief to try to report another while in the middle of a crime. Even trapped, the wounded warrior becomes enraged and tries to throw a brutal punch at the masked protagonist. The impact of the blow furiously smashes the ground, showing that his strength is still extremely destructive. The shockwave sends several other metal traps flying into the air, forcing the young man to dodge quickly. The injured opponent smiles sadistically upon seeing the lethal mechanisms scatter chaotically across the grass. Jin So-won curses mentally as he has to perform risky acrobatics to avoid getting caught by his own devices. The enemy threatens to rip off his mask and quarter him while the leader celebrates his partner's quick reaction. The protagonist remains completely silent, just observing the situation and calculating his next move. Soon after, he begins to retreat at high speed through the woods, making his adversaries believe he is fleeing. The leader orders an immediate pursuit, but his partner warns that the target is running towards the area filled with traps. The swordsman boasts that they just need to step exactly in the footprints left by the protagonist to stay safe. The accomplice praises his superior's cunning as they both leap, mimicking Jinso-won steps with great skill. The frantic chase continues through the dark forest, with the duo following the tracks relentlessly and swiftly. They maintain total focus on the footprints on the foliage, believing they have completely deciphered the escape pattern. The leader laughs loudly, scorning the masked man's tricks and stating that his plan has failed miserably. However, the protagonist makes one last lone leap, landing extremely lightly on a tree. He slides on the ground and adopts a defensive stance, facing the duo with a look of pure amusement from behind his mask. The 2 criminals laugh, believing they have cornered the young man, and that his life will finally end there. They leap together to deliver the final attack, not realizing the terrible surprise that awaits their landing. The protagonist watches them fall with his eyes wide in anticipation of the perfect outcome of his trap. The instant their feet touch the ground exactly on the indicated marks, the hidden trigger is activated. A cruel smile forms under Jin So-won's mask as he sees the adversary's foolishness has sealed their fate. Several giant bear traps snapshot at the same time, crushing the legs of both swordsmen with brutal force. The leader lets out a scream of absolute terror, as he realizes he fell for the most obvious and well-planned trap in the forest. Both collapse to the ground, groaning in intense pain and bleeding heavily, completely immobilized by the iron teeth. Jin So-won draws his shining sword and scoffs, saying they were a little smarter than he imagined. He explains that to avoid the traps, one had to step in the exact same spot without being off by a single centimeter. The swordsman stammers in terror, saying it's impossible for anyone to have such absurd and perfect movement precision. He asks in disbelief how the young man managed to move with such accuracy in a field completely mined with dangers. The protagonist just grips the hilt of his weapon firmly, stating that the secret to it all lies in his perfect mind. He declares that his fantastic memory is the one and only divine gift he received to change the course of things. The moonlight illuminates the forest, as one last merciless attack puts an end to the fate of those 2 traitors. The next day, the imposing and sunny headquarters of the Tail sect in Happy stands out under a clear blue sky. Inside the residence, a hand calmly holds a cup of hot tea, while planning the next steps. Jiggle Samyeon, the chief strategist of the Miram Alliance, vaguely recalls that this was one of the traditional sections. Elder Nam Gung T1 agrees with a cunning smile, commenting on the emergence of stronger rival groups in the region. They coldly conclude that it's high time to replace the weakened Teal sect with a new and stronger group. The strategist asks if the sect expanding its power in the region would be the influential Iron Sword sect. The elder smiles, pouring more tea, and confirms that the rumors circulating behind the scenes of the alliance are real. Jiggle recalls that an official sect can only be replaced if it commits a serious infraction against local laws. With a malicious look, the elder reveals that there are rumors that the Tail sect has been selling its special spots. Hearing that the rival sect might be using its recommendations to make money makes the strategist hesitate for a moment. He questions whether the Tail sect would really abuse its greatest privilege as one of the group's traditional members. The elder states with conviction that they would do anything crazy just to satisfy their own financial greed. He asks if the traditional sect would have the courage to turn its back on its own dignity and historical honor. The elder reiterates with disdain that their greed for money would trump any sense of honor or ancient tradition. Outside, a small bird perched on a branch silently observes the large traditional mansion at dusk. Silence reigns in the luxurious room as the two powerful men continue to plot their political plans. The elder gestures with falsehood, asking not to be misunderstood and pretending he doesn't want to replace the sect. The chief strategist listens to him attentively, keeping his eyes half closed and analyzing his colleague's every word. The elder remembers that the privileges were granted to honor those who fought bravely in difficult times. He hypocritically states that he feels deeply saddened to see the prestigious alliance's name being tarnished. Jegal offers the cup full of mystical tea, sealing the silent agreement between the two alliance strategists. Later that night, the protagonist sits alone in the dark courtyard under the stars to focus on his cultivation. The young man closes his eyes and concentrates his mind as blue flames of internal energy begin to envelop his body. Electrical marks of blue power appear on his muscular back, indicating the release of an immense spiritual force. He takes a deep breath, his body covered in sweat, feeling the energy channels finally expand completely. As he opens just one of his intensely glowing eyes, he realizes that the mystical advancement has been completed with total success. Sitting in a lotus position on the wooden floor, the young man controls the flow of power that emanates freely around him. He clenches his fist and celebrates, having managed to absorb the mystical pill in a short time of continuous meditation. The young man celebrates joyfully upon realizing that his current energy level has already surpassed the maximum limit of his past life. He gets dressed in a hurry and begins to descend the wooden steps of the inn in a calm and rhythmic manner. Upon entering the dining area, he spots the young rustic helper sleeping exhausted on one of the wooden tables. The boy wakes up with a start and celebrates with relief upon seeing that the young master has finally left his room. The helper confesses he was worried about him being gone for days, but the young man just asks for something to eat. The little boy laments in fear, saying the kitchen has already closed for the night due to the late hour. Jinso smiles slyly and places a generous pile of silver coins on the table to motivate the helper. The boy runs off happily to wake the cook, while the protagonist concludes that money solves any problem. He mentally gives thanks for having used the mystical bracelet to get that significant amount of coins. He recalls when he faced a giant wild tiger deep in the dark forest during his hunt. The mystical jade dragon bracelet proved to be extremely useful, working not just against demons and monsters. He managed to drain and absorb the wild beast's entire life force, converting it into pure internal energy for himself. To make things better, he even sold the valuable tiger pelts to the local hunter, earning a nice extra fortune. Although he's satisfied with easily raising funds, he knows there is a dangerous problem to be solved. The dragon bracelet's power is so dark that it could easily be mistaken for a demonic cult technique. He knows that using this ability carelessly in front of other warriors would be a fatally dangerous move. If members of the Miram Alliance discover he drains the essence of creatures, the consequences will be dire. He swears to himself that he will keep his biggest secret very well hidden so as not to put his entire sect at risk. His dark thoughts are interrupted by the cheerful helper, who arrives carrying plates full of hot food. The protagonist's mouth waters at the sight of the beautiful meal, and he decides it's time to devour it all without delay. He eats the noodles greedily, while the two helpers watch him very curiously and attentively. The boy excitedly asks if he has heard the rumors that recently started circulating around the city of Happy. He begins to narrate what happened at the lavish party of the Merchant Association that was held to celebrate the mystical pill. The boy reveals, gossiping, that the valuable treasure was stolen right in the middle of the event, making the young man nearly choke. He comments that the thief must be incredibly skilled, and that the Alliance sent investigators to handle the case. Upon hearing that official investigators are after the person responsible, the young man chokes badly on his food in shock. The boy offers water, startled, while the young man tries to recover to ask what the investigators will do now. The protagonist asks if the Miram Alliance's investigation team managed to find any clues about the real thief. His eyes widen as he thinks with dread that it would be an absolute disaster if they had arrested someone in his place. But the boy reveals that the investigators quickly lost the trail and couldn't find any useful clues. Relieved, the young man lets out a sigh of gratitude in his thoughts and pretends to lament the huge loss the merchant suffered. The boy mentions that another banquet will soon be held in the region, catching the curious young man's attention. He is paralyzed with shock upon hearing that the festive event will take place at the powerful Iron Sword sect. The little one explains that the leader will celebrate his 60th birthday with a huge and luxurious 7-day party. He melancholically recalls that this significant event did indeed happen exactly during this period in his past life. The young man recalls the painful humiliation he suffered in the past during the celebrations of that same birthday at the sect. He remembers the arrogant face of the rival sect's old leader who watched everything with a mocking and sadistic smile on that terrible occasion. His beloved father was forced to kneel humiliatingly in front of dozens of spectators. He had to make a public apology to the leader of the Iron Sword sect, shattering all his family's pride and dignity. That whole scene of family humiliation happened because of one single person directly responsible for that terrible mistake. And that person was none other than himself, Jin So-won, who at the time was a foolish and completely inept young man. Thinking about this, the young man clenches his fist with immense force, filled with the unshakable determination to change the course of history. He makes the firm decision that, no matter the cost, no member of his sect will set foot at that cursed birthday banquet. He abruptly stands up from the table, thanking them for the food and leaving the little helper confused by his reaction. The young man walks resolutely towards the exit, ignoring the concerned calls of the boy who tries to follow him. He swears he will never allow his father to suffer any kind of humiliation on his account in this new chance at life. However, his plans change drastically when he finds himself in the middle of a deadly confrontation at the festive event itself. The attacks collide with immense force, generating bright sparks and making the surrounding air vibrate with the energy of the combat. He ended up involved in a life-or-death duel against the grandson of the Iron Sword, sect's leader himself.